Chapter 1. The Invitations That Break the World. Linda Baker had always liked the sound of envelopes sliding across a table. It reminded her of holidays, birthdays, the small rituals that made life feel orderly. On this particular Saturday afternoon, the sound felt almost musical. Sunlight poured through the living room windows, warming the hardwood floor and catching the gold flecks in her daughter's hair as Emily hunched over a stack of graduation invitations. "Mom, how do you spell Mrs. Callahan's first name again?" Emily asked without looking up. "L-L-E," Linda said, sipping her tea. "She insists it's pronounced Ellie, but she likes the fancy spelling." Emily snorted. "Of course she does." Linda smiled. Her daughter's humor had sharpened in college, but it still carried the same warmth she'd had as a child. Today felt easy, one of those rare afternoons when the world seemed to pause long enough for them to enjoy each other's company. Emily was graduating in a month, and Linda felt proud in a way that made her chest ache. She'd done something right. She must have. Emily finished the last card with a flourish, then stacked the invitations neatly and handed them over. "Proofread, please. I refuse to be responsible for offending relatives I barely know." Linda laughed and took the stack. "You're the one who wanted to do handwritten invitations." "I was feeling sentimental," Emily said. "Don't make fun of me. I wouldn't dare." Linda began reading through the names, smiling at the familiar ones. Her parents, her sister, her aunt in Vermont. She paused at a few she hadn't thought about in years. It was strange how families expanded and contracted over time, like lungs. She reached the bottom of the stack. Her smile faded. She flipped through the cards again. Slower this time. No, she must have missed it. She checked a third time. Still no. She said softly. "Where's your father's invitation?" Emily looked up, her expression blank. "What? Your father?" Linda repeated, her voice tightening. "You didn't write one for him." Emily blinked, confused. "Why would I?" Linda stared at her. "Because he's your father." Emily let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Mom, he hasn't been my father since I was 16. The room seemed to tilt. Linda set the stack down carefully, as though it might explode. "What are you talking about?" Emily shrugged, her tone maddeningly casual. "After my 16th birthday, I told him I didn't want him anymore. He accepted it. End of story." Linda's mouth fell open. "You what?" "Emily, that's not. Why would you say something like that?" Emily's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in mild irritation, as though her mother were missing something obvious. "He wasn't good enough for you to keep, so why are you upset that I didn't want him either?" The words hit Linda like a physical blow. She felt her breath catch, felt her pulse thrum in her ears. "Emily," she whispered, That's not what happened, isn't it?" Emily asked, leaning back on the couch. "You divorced him. You moved on. You barely talked about him. I figured he was just gone." Linda pressed a hand to her forehead. "When was the last time you actually visited him?" Emily frowned, thinking. "I don't know. 14? 15? Somewhere around there." Linda felt dizzy. She sank into the nearest chair, gripping the armrest. "You stopped visiting him when you were 14? "I guess," Emily said. "He lived in that crappy apartment. It was depressing." Crappy apartment. Linda had never asked where he lived after the divorce. She'd assumed. God, she didn't even know what she'd assumed. That he'd find a better place. That he'd rebuild. That he'd be okay. She had never checked. Her stomach twisted. "Emily, did you ever talk to him after you told him you didn't want him?" "No," Emily said simply. "He didn't fight me. He didn't argue. He just said okay." Linda closed her eyes. She could see him, Mark, standing in some dim hallway, hearing his daughter say she didn't want him. She could imagine his face, that quiet confusion he'd worn the day she told him she wanted a divorce. He hadn't yelled then either. He hadn't fought. He'd just accepted it like he accepted everything else. "Mom," Emily said, "why are you acting like this is a big deal?" Linda opened her eyes. "Because he paid for your college tuition." Emily blinked. "Yeah, I know. You told me he was helping." "Helping?" Linda whispered. "Emily, he paid every semester. He paid the full amount." Emily shrugged again. "Okay, and?" Linda felt something inside her crack. "And you didn't invite him to your graduation." Emily's expression softened slightly, but only slightly. "Mom, he's not part of my life." Linda stood slowly, as though her legs were made of glass. "When was the last time you even spoke to him?" "I told you," Emily said. 16. Linda stared at her daughter. Really stared, seeing not malice but a terrible, simple truth. Emily had learned from her. Learned that Mark didn't matter. Learned that he was disposable. Learned that he was someone you could leave behind without looking back. "Oh God," Linda whispered. Emily frowned. "Mom, are you okay?" Linda shook her head. No, I'm not." She sat down again, hard, the realization slamming into her. Mark had given up his scholarship to support her when she got pregnant at 20. He'd worked himself to exhaustion for years. He'd never complained. He'd never asked for anything. And she had taken everything from him. His marriage, his daughter, his future. and never once checked to see if he survived the loss. She had assumed he would be fine. She had assumed he would move on. She had assumed wrong. "Mom," Emily said cautiously. "You're freaking me out." Linda looked at her daughter, her voice barely audible. "What's his address?" Emily shrugged. "I don't know. He probably moved out of that crappy place." Linda felt sick. She had no idea where he lived. No idea what his life looked like. No idea whether he had friends, hobbies, hope. She had never wondered. She had never cared enough to wonder. The stack of invitations sat on the table, neat and innocent. Linda stared at them, feeling the weight of years she had never examined pressing down on her chest. For the first time since the divorce, she felt the full gravity of what she had done. And she knew, without question, that she had to find him. Chapter 2. The man she left behind. Linda hadn't planned to drive to Mark's old apartment. She told herself she was only running errands, only clearing her head, only trying to make sense of the conversation with Emily. But her car seemed to move on its own, turning down familiar streets she hadn't traveled in years. Muscle memory guided her more than intention. The neighborhood looked smaller than she remembered. Narrow streets, aging brick buildings, a laundromat with a flickering sign. She slowed as she approached the squat beige complex where Mark had lived after the divorce. She expected it to look different, renovated, repainted, replaced. Instead, it looked exactly the same, as though time had passed everywhere except here. Her heart thudded as she parked across the street. She sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the building. She didn't know what she expected. Maybe she thought she'd see signs of a new life, new car, new furniture visible through a window, a potted plant on a balcony, something that would prove he'd moved on. But the building was quiet, too quiet. She stepped out of the car, her legs unsteady. She crossed the street slowly, feeling like she was trespassing on a life she'd abandoned. The stairwell smelled faintly of dust and old carpet cleaner. She climbed to the second floor, her breath shallow. His door was still the same faded blue. She froze at the top of the stairs. She couldn't knock. She wasn't ready. She didn't even know what she would say. "Hi, sorry I dismantled your life. Want to chat?" No. She needed a plan. She needed words that didn't exist yet. She turned to leave. That's when she saw him. Mark rounded the corner of the walkway, carrying a grocery bag with a loaf of bread sticking out the top. He wore a plain gray shirt and jeans that looked a little too loose. His hair was thinner, his shoulders slightly hunched, but his walk was still the same. Steady, quiet, unassuming. Linda's breath caught. She ducked instinctively behind a concrete pillar, pressing herself against it like a guilty teenager. Oh God, oh God, oh God. She peeked around the edge. He didn't see her. He walked to his door, unlocked it, and stepped inside. No hesitation. No pause. No expectation that anyone might be waiting for him. The door closed with a soft click. Linda stayed frozen for several seconds, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure someone could hear it. She felt ridiculous, hiding behind a pillar like she was spying on him. But she couldn't move. Seeing him had knocked something loose inside her, something she didn't know how to handle. She finally forced herself to leave, descending the stairs quickly, almost tripping on the last step. She reached her car and sat inside, breathing hard. He looked lonely, not angry, not bitter, just alone in a way that made her chest ache. She rested her forehead against the steering wheel. "What have I done?" she whispered. She didn't cry. She felt too stunned to cry. Instead, she drove home in silence, replaying the image of him walking into that apartment. An apartment he should have left years ago, an apartment he should have outgrown. When she reached her house, she went straight to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Her hands shook. She set the glass down and leaned against the counter, trying to steady herself. She needed to talk to someone. She needed perspective. She grabbed her phone and called her best friend, Marcy. Marcy answered on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" "I did something stupid," Linda said. "Define stupid." "I went to Mark's apartment." There was a beat of silence. "Oh boy. Okay. Start from the beginning." Linda told her everything. Emily's revelation, the missing invitation, the shock, the guilt, the drive, seeing Mark, hiding like a lunatic. Marcy listened without interrupting. When Linda finished, Marcy exhaled slowly. "Linda, you've been living like the past was a closed book. But it wasn't closed for him." "I know," Linda whispered. "I didn't realize how bad it was." "You didn't want to realize," Marcy said gently. "You were trying to survive your own life. But now you're seeing the fallout." Linda rubbed her forehead. "He looked so small, like he shrank." "He didn't shrink," Marcy said. "Life squeezed him." Linda swallowed hard. "I have to talk to him." "Yes," Marcy said. "But maybe next time don't hide behind a pillar." Linda let out a shaky laugh. "I panicked. I gathered." Linda sank into a chair. "What do I even say to him?" "Start with the truth," Marcy said. "You didn't know. You should have known. You're sorry, and you want to fix what you can." Linda nodded slowly. "I'll go back tomorrow." "Good. And Linda?" "Yeah. Be prepared for him not to want anything from you." Linda closed her eyes. I know. After they hung up, Linda sat in silence for a long time. She thought about the early years of her marriage. Mark working double shifts, coming home exhausted but still smiling at her. She thought about the divorce, about how she'd convinced herself she was doing the right thing, about how she'd believed he would bounce back. She had never imagined he wouldn't. She went to bed early, but sleep didn't come easily. Her mind replayed the moment he walked into his apartment, the quiet way he moved, the absence of anything resembling joy. She couldn't leave things like this. She wouldn't. The next morning, she woke with a strange clarity. She showered, dressed, and stood in front of the mirror. She looked older than she felt, lines around her eyes, a softness in her jaw, but she also looked determined. She grabbed her keys. She was going back. This time she wouldn't hide. This time she would knock. This time, she would face the man she had once loved, and the consequences of everything she had never bothered to see. Chapter 3. The first conversation. Linda stood outside Mark's apartment door with her fist raised, frozen mid-knock like a malfunctioning statue. The hallway was quiet except for the hum of an old vending machine downstairs. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears. She had rehearsed a dozen openings on the drive over. Asterisk hi. How are you? Asterisk I'm sorry. Emily told me everything. I didn't know. But every version sounded either pathetic or intrusive. She lowered her fist, exhaled, then raised it again. 3 soft knocks. For a moment nothing happened. She wondered if he wasn't home. Wondered if she should flee before she had to face him. Wondered if she could pretend she'd never come. Then the lock clicked. The door opened. Mark stood there holding a mug of coffee. He looked at her with mild confusion, as though she were a neighbor asking about a lost package. His eyes were tired but gentle, the same eyes she remembered from years ago, eyes that had once looked at her like she was the center of his world. Linda, he said quietly. Her throat tightened. Hi. He blinked once, slowly. Hi. They stared at each other for a few seconds that felt like a full minute. Linda forced herself to breathe. Can I talk to you? She asked. Mark hesitated, then stepped back and opened the door wider. Sure. She entered the apartment. It was exactly as she remembered. Small, tidy, worn. A single couch, a small table, a bookshelf with only a few items. No clutter. No signs of a life expanding. Just the bare minimum needed to exist. He gestured toward the couch. You can sit. She sat. He took the chair across from her, setting his mug on the table. He waited, hands folded loosely, posture calm. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't angry. He wasn't anything. He was simply present. Linda swallowed hard. I saw Emily's invitations yesterday. He nodded once, polite but unreadable. She didn't write one for you? Linda said, her voice trembling. I didn't know. I didn't know she hadn't seen you in years. I didn't know she told you she didn't want you anymore. Mark looked down at his hands. She was 16. I know, Linda whispered. But I didn't know she meant it. I didn't know she stopped visiting. I didn't know she cut you out completely. Mark nodded again, still calm. It's okay. No, Linda said, leaning forward. It's not okay. He looked up at her, his expression soft but distant. Linda, it's all right. She was a teenager. She was figuring things out. She was a child, Linda said. And I didn't notice. I didn't ask. I didn't check. I thought she still saw you. I thought you two still had a relationship. Mark gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. It's not your fault. Yes, it is, Linda said. I should have known. I should have paid attention. He shook his head gently. You were building your life. I didn't want to interfere. Linda stared at him. Interfere? Mark, you're her father. He didn't react. He didn't flinch. He simply absorbed the words like he absorbed everything else with quiet resignation. Linda felt her chest tighten. Why didn't you tell me? What would it have changed? He asked softly. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't have an answer. Mark leaned back in his chair. Emily said she didn't want me anymore. I didn't want to make her uncomfortable. I didn't want to force myself into her life. But you're her father, Linda repeated, her voice cracking. He gave a small shrug. People leave. I learned that. Linda felt tears sting her eyes. Mark. He lifted a hand slightly, not to stop her, but to steady the moment. Linda, it's all right. Really? No, it's not, she said. You deserved better. He smiled faintly. I'm fine. You're not, she whispered. He didn't respond. Linda looked around the apartment. The bare shelves, the single lamp, the quiet emptiness. You're still living here. Yes, you could have moved. I couldn't afford to. She felt her stomach drop. Because of Emily's tuition? He nodded. It was important. Linda pressed a hand to her mouth. Mark, you paid for everything. He nodded again as though it were obvious. She needed it. And you didn't tell me, Linda said. It wasn't your responsibility. Linda shook her head slowly. You gave up everything for us. And I didn't even know what you were losing. Mark looked at her with a softness that made her chest ache. Linda, you don't owe me anything. I owe you everything, she said. He smiled again, small and sad. No, you don't. They sat in silence for a moment. Linda wiped her eyes, embarrassed. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Mark looked at her with a calm she didn't understand. You don't have to apologize. Yes, I do, she said. I didn't know. I didn't see. I didn't ask. I should have. He took a slow breath. Linda, I'm not angry. That's the problem, she said. You should be. He chuckled softly, the sound thin but genuine. I don't have the energy to be angry. Linda felt her heart twist. Emily is graduating next month. He nodded. I know. I want you to come. He looked down at his hands again. I don't think she wants that. She doesn't know what she wants, Linda said. She's confused. She's hurt. She's wrong. Mark didn't answer. Linda leaned forward. Please come. He hesitated. I don't want to make her uncomfortable. You won't, Linda said. I'll talk to her. He looked up, meeting her eyes. Linda, I don't want to cause trouble. You won't, she repeated. He exhaled slowly. I'll think about it. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. Linda nodded, accepting it. Thank you. Mark stood, picking up his mug. Do you want coffee? She blinked. What? He gestured toward the kitchen. Coffee. She let out a shaky laugh. Sure. He moved quietly, filling the kettle, measuring grounds. Linda watched him, noticing how careful he was with every movement, how gentle, how small his world had become. She realized then that she wasn't just here to apologize. She was here to help him live again. When he handed her the mug, their fingers brushed. He didn't pull away. He didn't tense. He simply looked at her with a quiet, unreadable expression. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't resentment. It was something in between, something fragile, something new, something that could grow. Chapter 4. The Unraveling. Linda woke the next morning with a heaviness behind her ribs, the kind that made breathing feel like a chore. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of her conversation with Mark. His calmness unsettled her more than anger ever could have. Anger meant someone still cared. His quiet acceptance felt like a door that had been closed for so long it no longer remembered being open. She forced herself out of bed, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. The house was too quiet. Emily was staying with friends for the weekend, which meant Linda had no distractions, no chatter, no background noise, no buffer between her thoughts and the truth she'd been avoiding. She pulled out her phone and stared at it. She needed to talk to Emily. She needed to fix this. She needed to understand how her daughter had drifted so far from her father without Linda noticing. She dialed. Emily answered on the second ring. Hey Mom, can you come home for a bit? Linda asked. Emily hesitated. I'm kind of busy. Please, Linda said. It's important. Emily sighed. Okay, I'll be there in 20. Linda hung up and exhaled shakily. She wasn't ready. She didn't know what she was going to say. She paced the living room, straightened pillows that didn't need straightening, wiped down a counter that was already clean. She felt like she was preparing for a confrontation she didn't know how to navigate. When Emily walked through the door, she looked wary. What's going on? Linda gestured toward the couch. Sit, please. Emily sat, crossing her legs, arms folded. Okay, talk. Linda swallowed. I visited your father yesterday. Emily's expression tightened. Why? Because I needed to see him, Linda said. I needed to understand what happened. Emily rolled her eyes. Mom, I told you what happened. No, Linda said gently. You told me what you felt, but you didn't tell me why. Emily looked away. It doesn't matter. It does, Linda said. It matters to me, and it matters to him. Emily scoffed. He doesn't care. Linda shook her head. He does. He just doesn't know how to show it anymore. Emily's jaw clenched. Mom, he was pathetic. He lived in that awful apartment. He never did anything. He never tried. Linda felt a sharp pang. He tried. He tried so hard he broke himself. Emily's eyes flashed. He didn't fight for me. Linda leaned forward. He didn't know how. He thought forcing himself into your life would hurt you. Emily looked at her mother with a mixture of frustration and confusion. Why are you defending him? Because I finally understand what he went through, Linda said softly. And I understand what I did to him. Emily frowned. You divorced him. You were miserable. You had every right. Yes, Linda said. I did. But I didn't realize how much he was carrying. I didn't realize how much he gave up. I didn't realize how much he lost. Emily looked down at her hands. He was always tired, always working, always stressed. He was trying to keep us afloat, Linda said. He gave up his scholarship. He worked long hours. He never complained. Emily's voice softened. I know. Linda took a breath. And when I left, he didn't fight because he didn't know how to fight for something that was already slipping away. Emily didn't respond. Linda continued, her voice trembling. He paid for your tuition, Em, every semester. He lived in that apartment because he couldn't afford anything else. He gave you everything he had left. Emily's eyes widened slightly. You told me he helped. He didn't help, Linda said. He paid. All of it. Emily looked stunned. Why would he do that? Because he loves you, Linda said. Even when you didn't want him. Emily's face tightened. I didn't know. Linda nodded. I know you didn't, and that's my fault. Emily looked up sharply. Your fault. Yes, Linda said. I should have made sure you stayed connected. I should have checked in. I should have asked questions. I should have made sure you understood that he mattered. Emily swallowed hard. I thought you didn't want him around. Linda felt her chest constrict. I didn't want him around me, but I never wanted him gone from you. Emily's voice cracked. You never said that. I know, Linda whispered. And I'm sorry. Emily looked away, blinking rapidly. I told him I didn't want him. I said it like it didn't matter. He accepted it, Linda said, because he thought you'd be happier without him. Emily pressed her palms to her eyes. I didn't mean it. I was angry. I was confused. I didn't know what I was doing. Linda moved to sit beside her daughter. You were 16. You were hurting. You didn't understand the weight of your words. Emily's voice was barely audible. I hurt him. Yes, Linda said gently. But you can fix it. Emily looked at her mother, fear flickering in her eyes. What if he doesn't want me anymore? Linda shook her head. He does. He always has. Emily exhaled shakily. I don't know what to say to him. You don't have to know, Linda said. You just have to show up. Emily nodded slowly, uncertain but willing. Linda felt a small, fragile hope bloom in her chest. But the moment didn't last. Emily stood abruptly. I need time. Linda nodded. Take it. Emily grabbed her bag and left without another word. The door closed softly behind her. Linda sank into the couch, exhausted. She had pushed too hard. She had said too much. But she couldn't regret it. The truth needed to be spoken, even if it hurt. She stared at the quiet living room, feeling the weight of years pressing down on her. She had spent so long believing she'd moved on, believing she'd done the right thing, believing the past was settled. But the past wasn't settled. It was unraveling, and she had no choice but to follow the threads. Chapter 5. The Man Behind the Quiet. Linda stood outside Mark's apartment again the next afternoon, holding a paper bag with 2 muffins from the bakery near her house. It felt absurd, showing up with pastries like she was trying to bribe a neighbor into liking her. But she didn't know what else to do. She needed a gesture that wasn't heavy with apology or drenched in guilt. Something simple. Something human. She knocked. Mark opened the door almost immediately, as though he'd been nearby. He looked at the bag in her hands, then at her face. Hi. Hi, she said, suddenly self-conscious. I brought muffins. He blinked. Okay. They're blueberry, she added, as though that clarified her intentions. He stepped aside. Come in. She entered, feeling the same quiet weight she'd felt the day before. The apartment wasn't dirty or neglected. It was simply minimal. A life stripped down to essentials. No framed photos. No decorations. No evidence of hobbies or interests. Just a couch, a chair, a table, and a man who had learned to live without expecting anything more. She set the muffins on the table. I didn't know if you liked blueberry. I do, he said. Thank you. He said it politely but not warmly. Not coldly either. Just neutrally. As though gratitude was a reflex rather than a feeling. Linda sat on the couch. Mark sat in the chair across from her, the same arrangement as yesterday. She wondered if he ever had visitors. She wondered if anyone had sat in that chair in the last year. Or the last 5. How are you? She asked. He shrugged. I'm all right. She nodded, unsure how to respond. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable exactly, but fragile. She cleared her throat. I talked to Emily. He looked up, attentive but cautious. Oh, she didn't know you paid her tuition, Linda said. She thought you were just helping. Mark nodded. I didn't want her to feel guilty. She doesn't, Linda said. She feels confused and ashamed. He looked down at his hands. She doesn't need to feel that. She does, Linda said gently. She said she didn't mean what she told you when she was 16. Mark's expression didn't change. She meant it enough. She was hurting, Linda said. She didn't understand what she was doing. He nodded again, slow and quiet. I know. Linda leaned forward. She wants to talk to you. He froze, not visibly, not dramatically, but she saw it. A subtle tightening in his shoulders. A flicker in his eyes. She said that? He asked. Yes. He exhaled, long and controlled. I don't want to make her uncomfortable. You won't, Linda said. She's scared. He looked at her, confused. Scared of me? No, Linda said. Scared of what she did. Scared of facing it. Mark looked away. I don't want her to feel obligated. She doesn't, Linda said. She wants to fix things. He didn't respond. Linda studied him. His face was thinner than she remembered. His hair had more gray. His posture was slightly hunched, like someone who had learned to take up less space. But his eyes, those soft, steady eyes, were the same. They had always been gentle. Even now, after everything, they held no bitterness. She took a breath. Mark, you deserve more than this. He looked at her, puzzled. More than what? This, she said, gesturing around the apartment. This life, this isolation, this quiet. He gave a faint smile. It's fine. It's not fine, Linda said. You don't do anything. You don't go anywhere. You don't have friends. He shrugged. I don't need much. You need people, she said. Everyone needs people. He shook his head gently. People take things. Linda felt her chest tighten. Not everyone. He didn't argue. He didn't agree. He simply sat there, quiet and steady, as though he'd already made peace with a life that required nothing from him. Linda swallowed. Do you ever want more? He hesitated. Sometimes. What kind of more? He looked at the floor. I don't know. I don't think about it. You should, Linda said softly. You deserve to. He didn't respond. Linda shifted on the couch. Would you want to get coffee with me? Not here. Somewhere outside. He blinked. Why? Because you need to leave this apartment, she said. And because I want to spend time with you. He looked genuinely surprised. Why? She exhaled. Because I care about you. He stared at her, expression unreadable. Linda, you don't have to do this. I know, she said. But I want to. He looked down again, fingers tapping lightly against his mug. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Talk. Be around people. Be normal. Linda smiled gently. We can start small. He didn't answer for several seconds. Then he nodded once. Okay. Okay, she repeated, hopeful. Coffee, he said. We can do coffee. Linda felt a small warmth bloom in her chest. Good. They sat in silence again, but this time it felt different. Less fragile, more open. She reached for the muffins and handed him one. He took it, hesitated, then took a bite. He closed his eyes briefly. These are good. She laughed softly. I'm glad. He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd walked into his apartment, she saw something flicker behind his eyes, something like life, something like possibility. Thank you, he said quietly. For the muffin? For coming back. Linda felt her throat tighten. You're welcome. He looked down at the muffin again, as though it were something precious. She watched him, realizing that this tiny moment, this quiet connection, was the beginning of something fragile and new. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not romance, not yet, but something that could grow if she didn't run from it, something that could heal if he let it, something that could become more than either of them expected. Chapter 6. The Daughter's Reckoning. Linda didn't expect Emily to come home that night, but she did, quietly, just after sunset, slipping through the front door with the hesitant posture of someone unsure whether they were welcome. Linda was in the kitchen rinsing dishes when she heard the soft click of the door. She dried her hands quickly and stepped into the living room. Emily stood there, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes uncertain. Hey, Linda offered a gentle smile. Hi. Emily shifted her weight. Can we talk? Linda nodded. Of course. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, the space between them feeling heavier than the air itself. Emily stared at her hands, twisting the strap of her backpack. I've been thinking, she said quietly. Linda waited. I didn't know Dad paid everything, Emily continued. I didn't know he stayed in that apartment because he couldn't afford anything else. I didn't know he didn't have anyone. Linda swallowed. I didn't know either. Emily looked up, eyes shining with confusion. How did we not know? Linda exhaled slowly. Because I didn't ask. And you didn't ask. And he didn't tell us. We all lived in our own corners. Emily nodded, but her expression tightened. Mom, I don't understand why he didn't fight for me. Linda leaned forward. Sweetheart, he thought fighting would hurt you. He thought forcing himself into your life would make you resent him more. Emily's voice cracked. I already resented him. You resented the situation, Linda said gently. Not him. Emily looked away. I told him I didn't want him. I said it like he was disposable. You were 16, Linda said softly. You were angry. You were confused. You were trying to make sense of everything. Emily pressed her palms to her eyes. I didn't mean it. I know, Linda whispered. Emily lowered her hands, her expression raw. Do you think he hates me? Linda shook her head. No, he doesn't hate anyone, especially not you. Emily's voice trembled. What if he doesn't want me anymore? Linda reached out and took her daughter's hand. He does. He always has. He just didn't know how to reach you. Emily's grip tightened. I don't know what to say to him. You don't need a speech, Linda said. You just need honesty. Emily nodded, but her eyes were still clouded with fear. I don't know how to start. Linda squeezed her hand. Start with hi. He'll meet you halfway. Emily let out a shaky breath. I want to see him. Linda felt a small, fragile hope bloom. We can go together. Emily hesitated. Not yet. I need a minute. Of course, Linda said. Take all the time you need. Emily leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. Mom. Yes. Why did you leave him? Linda felt the question like a sudden gust of cold air. She took a slow breath. Because I was overwhelmed. Because I was scared. Because I thought I was failing. Because I didn't know how to ask for help. Emily looked at her mother, searching her face. Did you stop loving him? Linda's throat tightened. No. I stopped believing I was good for him. Emily blinked. You thought you were the problem? Linda nodded. He was working himself to exhaustion. I felt like I was dragging him down. I thought if I left, he'd have a chance to breathe. Emily's voice softened. But he didn't. No, Linda whispered. He didn't. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years settling between them. Emily finally spoke. I want to fix this. Linda nodded. We will. Emily looked at her mother, eyes steady. I want to see him soon. Linda felt her chest warm. He'll be grateful. Emily swallowed. I'm scared. I know, Linda said. But you're brave. Emily gave a small, shaky smile. I don't feel brave. You're here, Linda said. That's brave. Emily leaned against her mother, resting her head on Linda's shoulder. Linda wrapped an arm around her, holding her close, feeling the fragile bond between them strengthen. After a moment, Emily spoke again. Mom. Yes. Do you think he'll come to my graduation? Linda hesitated. He said he'd think about it. Emily nodded slowly. I want him there. Linda felt her heart swell. I'll tell him. Emily sat up, wiping her eyes. I'm going to bed. Linda nodded. Sleep well. Emily walked down the hallway, pausing at her bedroom door. Mom. Linda looked up. Yes, thank you. Linda smiled softly. Always. Emily disappeared into her room, closing the door gently behind her. Linda sat alone in the living room, the quiet settling around her like a blanket. She felt tired, but not defeated. For the first time in years, she felt movement, real movement, in the relationships she had let drift. She stood, walked to the kitchen, and poured herself a glass of water. She stared out the window at the dark street, thinking of Mark in his small apartment, thinking of Emily's fear and hope, thinking of the years they had all lost. Tomorrow she would go back to Mark. Tomorrow she would tell him Emily wanted to see him. Tomorrow she would take another step toward repairing what she had broken. She didn't know what the future looked like, but for the first time in a long time she wanted to find out. Chapter 7, The Bridge Rebuilt. Linda didn't sleep well. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mark sitting in that small chair, holding a blueberry muffin like it was something delicate. She saw Emily's face, fearful, hopeful, ashamed. She saw the years between them, stretched thin and fragile, waiting for someone to take the first step. By morning, she knew what she had to do. She dressed, grabbed her keys, and drove to Mark's apartment. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that made the world feel suspended. She climbed the stairs, her pulse steady but strong, and knocked. Mark opened the door with the same quiet expression he always wore, but something in his eyes softened when he saw her. Hi, she said. Can we talk? He stepped aside. Of course. She entered, noticing the faint scent of coffee. He must have just made a fresh pot. He gestured toward the couch and she sat. He took his usual chair. She didn't waste time. Emily wants to see you. Mark froze, not dramatically, but enough that she saw the shift. His fingers tightened slightly around the mug he held. She said that? He asked. Yes, Linda said. She's scared, but she wants to fix things. Mark looked down at his hands. I don't want her to feel obligated. She doesn't, Linda said. She feels responsible. He exhaled slowly. I don't know what I'd say to her. You don't have to know, Linda said. Just be honest. He nodded, but his expression remained uncertain. I don't want to make her uncomfortable. You won't, Linda said gently. She's ready. He didn't respond. He stared at the floor, lost in thought. Linda leaned forward. Mark, she's hurting. She didn't understand what she was doing when she pushed you away. She was a child. He nodded again, slow and quiet. I know. She wants to meet you, Linda said. In a neutral place, somewhere calm. He looked up. Where? I thought maybe the park, Linda said. The one near the library. It's quiet. He hesitated. When? Today, Linda said. If you're willing. He took a long breath, then nodded once. Okay. Linda felt relief wash through her. Thank you. He stood, grabbed his jacket from the hook near the door, and slipped it on. Let's go. She blinked. Now? He nodded. If we wait, she might change her mind. Linda stood. All right. They walked down the stairs together, the silence between them not tense but thoughtful. When they reached her car, he paused. Do you want to drive? She asked. He nodded. If that's okay. She unlocked the doors and they got in. The drive was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Mark stared out the window, his posture steady but his hands clasped tightly in his lap. When they reached the park, Emily was already there, sitting on a bench near the pond. She looked small, shoulders hunched, hands folded tightly. When she saw them, she stood quickly, her expression a mixture of fear and hope. Mark froze beside the car. Linda touched his arm gently. "It's okay." He nodded, then stepped forward. Emily took a hesitant step toward him. "Hi." Mark swallowed. "Hi." They stood facing each other, neither knowing what to do. Linda stayed back, giving them space. Emily's voice trembled. I'm sorry." Mark shook his head. "You don't have to apologize." "I do," Emily said. "I said things I didn't mean. I hurt you. I didn't understand." Mark's eyes softened. "You were 16. I was cruel," Emily whispered. "You were hurting," Mark said. "I didn't want to make it worse." Emily blinked rapidly. "I didn't know you paid for everything." "It wasn't your burden," Mark said gently. Emily shook her head. "It should have been. I should have known. I should have asked." Mark gave a small smile. "You were busy becoming someone. That mattered more." Emily's voice cracked. "I didn't mean to leave you." "I know," Mark said. Emily took a shaky breath. "Do you still want me in your life?" Mark's expression changed, subtle, but unmistakable. A flicker of something warm, something hopeful, something long buried. "Of course I do," he said softly. "I never stopped." Emily let out a sob and stepped forward. Mark hesitated only a moment before opening his arms. She hugged him tightly, burying her face in his shoulder. He held her gently, as though afraid she might break. Linda felt her throat tighten. She looked away, giving them privacy, staring at the pond where ducks drifted lazily across the water. After a moment, Emily pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Can we start over?" Mark nodded. "I'd like that." Emily smiled, small but real. "Me too." They sat on the bench together, talking quietly. Linda approached slowly, unsure whether to join them. Emily looked up and gestured for her to sit. Linda sat beside them, feeling the warmth of the moment settle around her. Emily looked at her father. "Are you coming to my graduation?" Mark hesitated. "If you want me there." "I do," Emily said firmly. He nodded. "Then I'll be there." Linda felt a swell of relief and something else. Something tender. Something unexpected. When the conversation drifted to lighter topics, Emily's classes, her plans after graduation, Linda watched Mark carefully. He was still quiet, still reserved, but something in him had shifted. His shoulders were less tense, his eyes brighter, his posture more open. He looked alive. After an hour, Emily stood. "I have to meet my friends. But can we do this again?" Mark nodded. "Anytime." Emily hugged him again, then hugged Linda, then walked away with a small wave. Linda and Mark remained on the bench, watching her go. "She's grown up," Mark said softly. "She has," Linda said. He looked at her. "Thank you." "For what?" "For helping her come back." Linda shook her head. "She came back because she wanted to." He smiled faintly. "You nudged her." Linda laughed softly. "Maybe." They sat in silence for a moment, the air cool and gentle around them. Mark finally spoke. "Would you want to walk a bit?" Linda nodded. "I'd like that." They stood and began walking along the path, side by side, not touching, not rushing, simply moving forward together. It wasn't romance, not yet, but it was something new, something hopeful, something that felt like the beginning of a life neither of them had expected to find again. Chapter 8. The New Beginning. The morning of Emily's graduation arrived with a brightness that felt almost symbolic. Sunlight spilled across Linda's kitchen table, catching the edges of the neatly stacked programs she'd picked up the day before. She stood at the counter, smoothing the front of her dress for the 5th time, nerves fluttering beneath her ribs. Emily came downstairs in her cap and gown, her expression a mix of excitement and tension. "How do I look?" Linda smiled. "Like someone who's about to conquer the world." Emily laughed softly, but her eyes flicked toward the window. "Do you think he'll come?" Linda didn't hesitate. "Yes." Emily nodded, but her fingers twisted nervously around the tassel hanging from her cap. "Okay." They left the house and drove to the campus, the air buzzing with the energy of families gathering, students posing for photos, and faculty bustling around with clipboards. Linda parked and stepped out, scanning the crowd. She didn't see him. Emily noticed her searching. "Mom, don't panic." "I'm not," Linda said, though her pulse betrayed her. They walked toward the auditorium, weaving through clusters of graduates. Emily spotted her friends and ran over to greet them, leaving Linda standing alone near a row of folding chairs. She took a slow breath, trying to steady herself. Then she saw him. Mark stood near the entrance, hands in his pockets, wearing a simple button-down shirt and clean slacks. He looked out of place among the bustling families, but he also looked present. His posture was straighter than usual, his expression calm but alert, as though he were bracing himself for something important. Linda walked toward him, her heart lifting with each step. "You came." He nodded. "I said I would." She smiled. "Thank you." He glanced around, taking in the crowd. "It's a lot of people." "It is," Linda said. "But you're here. That matters." He nodded again, his eyes softening slightly. Where's Emily? She's with her friends, Linda said. She'll be out soon. They stood together, watching families take photos, hearing bursts of laughter and excited chatter. Mark seemed overwhelmed, but not uncomfortable, just unused to being part of something so lively. After a moment, Emily spotted him. She froze mid-sentence, her friends still talking beside her. Then she excused herself and walked toward him, her steps slow but steady. "Hi," she said softly. Mark's voice was gentle. "Hi." Emily looked him over, her eyes warming. "You look nice." He gave a small smile. "Thank you." She hesitated, then reached out and hugged him. He returned the embrace carefully, as though afraid she might vanish if he held too tightly. When they pulled apart, Emily wiped her eyes. "I'm glad you're here." Mark nodded. "Me too." The ceremony began soon after. They found seats together, Linda on one side, Mark on the other, Emily's friends scattered nearby. As the graduates filed in, Linda glanced at Mark. He watched the procession with quiet pride, his eyes following Emily as she walked across the stage with her classmates. When Emily's name was called, she stepped forward, accepted her diploma, and smiled at the crowd. Linda clapped, tears in her eyes. Mark clapped too, softly, but with unmistakable pride. After the ceremony, families spilled into the courtyard for photos. Emily posed with her friends, then with Linda, then with both of them together. When she turned to Mark, she hesitated. "Can we take one?" she asked. Mark nodded, surprised but pleased. They stood side by side, Emily leaning slightly toward him. Linda snapped the photo, her heart swelling at the sight. Emily checked her phone. "I love it." Mark looked at the picture, his expression softening. "It's a good one." Emily hugged him again. "Thank you for coming." He nodded. "Thank you for inviting me." She smiled, then ran off to join her friends for a group photo. Linda watched her go, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Mark stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "She's grown up." "She has," Linda said. "She's finding her way." He nodded. "You did a good job." Linda looked at him, surprised. "I don't know about that." "I do," he said quietly. She felt her breath catch. "Mark." He looked at her, his expression gentle but steady. "Thank you for everything you've done these past few weeks." Linda shook her head. "I didn't do anything." "You did," he said. "You came back." She swallowed. "I should have come back sooner." He didn't argue. He didn't reassure her. He simply stood there, accepting the truth without bitterness. They walked together toward the parking lot, the crowd thinning around them. Emily was staying with friends for the evening, leaving Linda and Mark alone. When they reached her car, Linda turned to him. "Would you want to get dinner?" "Not fancy. Just something simple." Mark hesitated. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I'd like to." He considered her for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." They drove to a small diner near campus, the kind with vinyl booths and laminated menus. They sat across from each other, the soft hum of conversation around them. Mark looked at the menu, then at her. "I haven't been out to dinner in a long time," he admitted. Linda smiled. "Then this is a good place to start." He nodded, relaxing slightly. "I guess it is." They ordered burgers, fries, iced tea, and talked quietly while they waited. Not about the past, not about regrets, about small things, light things, things that felt like stepping stones toward something new. When the food arrived, Mark took a bite and smiled. "This is good." Linda laughed softly. "It is." They ate, talked, and shared small moments of humor. Nothing dramatic, nothing heavy, just two people rediscovering each other in the gentle glow of a diner booth. When they left, the sky was streaked with orange and pink. They stood beside her car, neither rushing to leave. Mark looked at her, his voice quiet. "I don't know what this is." Linda met his gaze. "It doesn't have to be anything yet." He nodded. "I don't want to rush." "We won't," she said. "We can start small." He smiled, really smiled, the kind she hadn't seen in years. "I'd like that." They stood together for a moment, the evening settling around them like a soft blanket. Then he stepped back, hands in his pockets. "See you soon?" he asked. Linda nodded. "Yes, soon." He walked to his car, and she watched him go, feeling something warm and steady bloom inside her. It wasn't the end. It was the beginning. A new one. Epilogue. 5 years later, the church glowed with soft golden light, the kind that made everything feel warm and suspended in time. Outside, summer air drifted through the open doors, carrying the faint scent of flowers and the hum of distant traffic. Inside, guests filled the pews, whispering excitedly as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Linda stood near the front, smoothing the skirt of her dress, her heart full in a way she hadn't known was possible 5 years ago. She glanced over her shoulder, and there he was, Mark, her husband. He stood beside her in a tailored navy suit, adjusting his tie with the same quiet concentration he used when debugging code. His hair was still peppered with gray, but he wore it confidently now. His posture was straight, his eyes bright, his presence steady. He looked like a man who had rebuilt himself piece by piece and finally recognized his own worth. Linda smiled at him. "You look handsome." He gave a small, shy smile, the same one he'd had since he was 20, but warmer now. "You look beautiful." She reached for his hand. He took it without hesitation. 5 years ago, he would have flinched at the attention. Now he held her hand openly, proudly, as though the world had finally become a place he was allowed to inhabit. The organ music shifted, signaling the ceremony was about to begin. Guests turned toward the back of the church. Emily was about to walk down the aisle. Linda squeezed Mark's hand. "Ready?" He exhaled, steady but emotional. "I think so." She knew what this moment meant to him. Not just seeing his daughter get married, but being here. Truly here. Present. Included. Loved. 5 years ago, he would have watched from a distance, convinced he didn't belong. But life had changed. He had changed. And Linda had changed with him. It hadn't been easy. After the graduation dinner, Linda had insisted, gently then firmly, that Mark go back to school. He had refused at first, shaking his head, saying he was too old, too tired, too far behind. But Linda had refused his refusal. She paid his tuition herself, telling him it wasn't charity, it was investment. In him. In their future. In the man she knew he could still become. He had caved eventually, reluctantly enrolling in a bachelor's program in science with a focus on web development and programming. The first semester was brutal. He doubted himself constantly. He worked slowly, carefully, terrified of failing. But Linda was there. Every night. Every assignment. Every moment he questioned whether he deserved a second chance. And over time, something remarkable happened. He grew. He learned. He thrived. He discovered he had a talent for clean, elegant code. He found joy in solving problems. He made friends, real friends, who admired his quiet humor and steady patience. He graduated earlier this year, walking across the stage with a confidence Linda had never seen in him before. 6 weeks later, he landed his first job. A good job. A job he loved. And now, standing in the church waiting for his daughter's wedding to begin, he looked like a man who had finally stepped into the life he deserved. The music swelled. Everyone rose. Emily appeared at the back of the church, radiant in her wedding gown, her arm linked with her fiancé's. Her smile was bright and steady, her eyes shimmering with joy. Linda felt tears prick her eyes. Beside her, Mark inhaled sharply. Emily saw him. She held his gaze, and she smiled, softly, lovingly, with the kind of warmth that only comes from healing. Mark's eyes glistened. He didn't wipe them. He didn't hide. He simply watched his daughter walk toward her future, his heart full in a way he once believed he would never feel again. When she reached the front, she hugged both of them, Linda first, then Mark. She held him tightly, whispering something only he could hear. His shoulders trembled, just slightly. Then she stepped forward with her fiancé, and the ceremony began. During the vows, Linda glanced at Mark. He wasn't watching the officiant. He wasn't watching the guests. He was watching Emily, his expression soft and full of pride. Linda leaned close and whispered, "She's happy." Mark nodded. "She is. You helped her get here." He shook his head gently. "We helped her." Linda smiled. "We're good at that." He looked at her, eyes warm. "We're good at a lot of things now." She squeezed his hand again. After the ceremony, guests spilled into the courtyard for photos. Emily insisted on taking a picture with both her parents, one where she stood between them, holding their hands, laughing as though the past had never been fractured. Mark laughed too, a real laugh, the kind that came from a place of peace. Linda felt her heart swell. Later, during the reception, Mark stood beside her at the edge of the dance floor, watching Emily and her new husband sway to the music. He slipped an arm around Linda's waist, pulling her close. "You know," he said softly, "I never thought I'd have this." Linda rested her head against his shoulder. "You earned it." He shook his head. "You gave me the chance." "No," she said gently. "I gave you the door. You walked through it." He smiled, leaning his forehead against hers. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Linda kissed him softly. "Never again." They stood together, watching their daughter dance, watching their family whole and healed, watching the life they had rebuilt. Slowly, painfully, beautifully. 5 years ago, everything had been broken. Now everything was new. And this time, Linda wasn't just part of Mark's life. She was his biggest supporter, his partner, his wife, his future. Together, they stepped onto the dance floor, moving in quiet rhythm beneath the soft lights, surrounded by laughter, music, and the gentle hum of a life finally lived fully. It wasn't a second chance. It was the life they were always meant to have.